We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hey, welcome to today's episode. It's a really good one. Hey Sam, how are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks, Hannah. Bit of an overcast day, but it's a great week and even more excited for this podcast.
Yes, today we're talking to Sarah. Welcome.
Thanks so
Hey,
much
Sarah.
for having me. Hi.
Welcome on.
So excited to be here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So, like we always first up ask, where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Zealand. You can tell from the very strong accent I haven't managed to lose. So I grew up in Wellington and my dad was in the army, so we travelled around quite a lot during my childhood. And then I moved to Auckland for a majority of high school, which is in the North Island, and then decided to study speech therapy. So moved to Christchurch in the South Island. And after a couple of years of working, I thought I'd go on my OE. So my plan was to go overseas for 3 months. And 19 years later, I have still not returned to New Zealand, but I went over to the UK. So thought I would be there for 3 to 6 months, do a little bit of travelling. Loved travelling. I got just got so much out of learning about life and culture and people, and met a man along the way. So we ended up being in Scotland for 8 years over there, working as a speech therapist of all things, which my first job was in a little fishing town way up in the north where they still speak Gaelic and Doric.
Oh, wow.
So they didn't understand me. I didn't understand them. I didn't know if I needed to see them for speech because I couldn't tell what they were saying, but absolutely loved it. And then ended up in Australia.
Yep.
So one of the consultants from PA Hospital came to the unit I worked in Glasgow, which was a specialist brain injury rehab unit, and said, we have a unit in Brisbane and would love a speechy that's got your experience to come. So we decided on a whim to move to Australia, and that's how we've ended up here.
Oh, well, we're very happy to have you.
Thanks. Well, we Googled when we were deciding on whether to come or not, and we Googled and saw that the winters in Australia were warmer than the summers in Edinburgh, where we actually lived. So it was a no-brainer. And I'm such a sunshine girl. I can't believe I managed 8 years in Scotland, but loved it. Loved the culture. Loved the adventure of life over there. But yeah, Queensland's now home. Although we only came for 12 months. My timeframes are not good. I was like, right, we're going to go do 12 months in Australia and then we'll move back to New Zealand, and we're coming up 11 years. So yeah, clearly I should not put timeframes on things.
Just gets extended by another 3 or 4 or 5 years.
It does, yes, yeah.
But no, that's an awesome story. I love how you sort of progressed from New Zealand over. And then how did you manage speech pathology in a predominantly Gaelic-speaking environment?
It was I remember taking the train from London up to, it was a place called Peterhead up the Aberdeen coast, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and there was a group of guys next to me, and I remember talking to them and saying, oh, are you from Europe? You sound Russian. And I went, oh no, pal, we're from Peterhead. And I was like, okay, so this is going to be the accent. So because nobody had met a Kiwi over there, so my accent stood out. So if I used to go and get Chinese on a Friday night, you'd go in and people would say, oh, you must be Sarah. Oh, you're seeing my neighbour's, granddaughter. Oh, you just became known to people. When I started, I had 103 on my caseload. So they hadn't had an adult speech pathologist for 3 years. So I had 103 to work towards. It was quite a caseload. And the first day I went and met this beautiful old lady, and I said to her, "Oh, my name's Sarah." Talked a little bit about me, and she sort of looked at me with the sort of, "I'm not quite understanding you." And I said, "Oh, do you have any children?" And she's like, "I also got a loon." And I was like, "Oh," I said, "Oh, I had an auntie, and when she was born, she had significant brain damage, and I guess there's lots of labels people call, different people that have additional needs." And she's sort of looking at me even more strangely at this point. And I just kept talking. I was like, "Slow your speech down, Sarah. Obviously, it's your rate of speech she's not understanding." And, kept talking, did the session, left, went to the next house and said, "Oh, making small talk, do you have any children?" "I got a loon." I was like, okay, I don't know what this word is, but I think I have misunderstood what a loon is in this country. And it turns out a loon is a son. So no wonder everyone looked at me strangely. But my whole time, these are the adventures I had when I then went to work in a care of the elderly ward in the hospital. I remember, you're doing sort of acute stroke, and so you're just making sure people can understand the basics, point to the window, point to the door, point to your bed. And I had this dear lady say to me, "Oh, lovey, can you see it? My daughter normally tweezes it out." And I was like, "No, your bed, your bed. "Oh, can you see it? Are the whiskers coming through?" And I was like, no, your bed. You're bad. And so from that time on, I spoke an English accent for all of my assessments. So I was not offending anybody with their facial hair instead of a bed. So yeah, I used to transition between this accent and then my English accent for all of my assessments and my therapy. So for 7 years, I was Sarah.
That's amazing. So what made you want to get into, I guess, speech pathology and the disability sector?
Yeah, so my auntie, like I said before, when she was born, the doctor was drunk that delivered her, and so caused significant amount of brain damage to her. And my grandparents lived in a really rural farming community in New Zealand, and they were told to forget they had a daughter, put her into an institution, and she'd be dead before she was 2. And they didn't. She grew up on the farm. She was active on the farm. She went to school. She lived a great life. She made the Special Olympics for bowling. She travelled. She loved life. She died at 72. So she got 70 years on what they predicted. But I think growing up, watching her, be different, speak differently, act differently, and the way people would react to her just lit a fire in me. Then my grandma, when I was 8, had a stroke. And because she was from the small community, they didn't have speech therapists. And I remember you could tell she could understand what we were saying, and we devised this sort of squeeze your hand communication for her last week of life. And I, again, just remember thinking, surely there's someone that does this for a job that can help people like this. And when I was looking for, what to do for a career, I went to a careers festival, and on the back of a bookmark was speech and language therapy, and I didn't really know about it, but found out more, and I thought, oh, this is it. So went into speech, wanting to do pediatric speech. Did my first placement with children and realised very quickly that paediatric speech was not for me. But in my final year, discovered stroke and brain injury rehab and swallowing. Love complex swallowing. So got to do research when I graduated in the swallowing world, get some articles published, and just, loved. It was just me. It just resonated with me. It fitted like the way, my ethos, and what I loved doing. So my first job was in the community. And so right from the get-go, community just had my heart. Just the functionality of it, and the fact that they're not a standalone person in a hospital bed or in a hospital gown, and you get to, somebody when you walk into their home. Like, it's such a privilege, and I've always said it, it's such an honour to enter someone's home. And we work, we live in countries where you can do this. Many countries we don't have that opportunity. And you get to see who they are and their roles. And I think that's so important in the essence of, the rehab supports I used to give, as a speechy, was who are you, and what makes you you, and what, not just you in isolation, but your community, your family, your things that matter. So that was always my heart from the onset, this community. So Yeah. So I guess I think that's the thing I love when you meet people in this sector. So many people have a story and we have a heart for why we do what we do. And there's a real reason behind what we do, which makes an incredibly special sector.
Yeah, I love hearing people's why.
Yes.
It's and that's the essence of this podcast. We always have people's why, and that's why that question,
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
so important to understanding the person is understanding their why.
Yes.
So what do you do now?
So now at the moment, I'm the regional manager for Ignite. So before Ignite, I was at Queensland Health and was working in the unit that dealt with all the catastrophic brain injuries of Queensland. So they were with us for quite a long time, having extended rehab. Was not looking to change from Queensland Health until my husband found David Dinker's job ad for Ignite. And I watched it 7 times in a row. And thought, I've never seen something so funny. It was based off The Office and was just this brilliant spoof about recruitment. And I think, when you think about recruitment, it's always the close pan-ups and the serious, come and work for Ignite Healthcare. We provide you with, that
The commercial line.
the message that everyone gives. And it was just completely different. I think he started off with, perks. We've got perks coming out of the wazoo. I mean, look at this. Unlimited water, and turned on the tap, and it was just something in me at that point was like, just a place you can be yourself. So interviewed for the role the next day as a team leader speech pathologist and got that role. So came across, and after a couple of weeks, David said to me, have you ever thought about doing business development? You'd be a natural at that. And I had to Google what business development was because I'm a clinician. I haven't done that. I don't know what he meant by that. Luckily, I've watched seasons and seasons of The Apprentice. So have some business acumen just by watching The Apprentice. Have watched the American and the English. So, feel I'm well versed internationally to comment on this.
Are a good thing.
Basically, that's my... But coming in, looking at business development, and yes, I mean, I love people. I love meeting people. I love connecting people. It is the thing that brings me so much joy. But also as a clinician, getting that ability to help shape a business that is going to foster a place where clinicians can grow and thrive, and listen to the market. So I came in, did team leader speech, did business development, and then we did a restructure, and I was privileged enough to become regional manager for Queensland, which I've done this year. And then David Dinker, who has all the good ideas, said to me, I think that you would be great in a position as director of growth. And the idea would be that you get to use all of your skills and all of the things that you are really good at and that you are passionate about, and bring them together for Ignite, not just Queensland, but for both states. And so Director of Growth will just be really about listening, being sensitive to the needs of the clinicians and sensitive to the needs of the market, and merging the two together. And the needs of clinicians is really dear to my heart because this is a sector where there is a incredibly big turnover. It's a very fast turnover. And we are losing great people. And so looking at how as businesses and as an organisation we can ensure that the clinicians that we have are thriving and growing and wanting to remain in the disability sector. And I often say if clinicians leave Ignite, my heart is that they don't leave disability. They stay within disability, find somewhere else that they can call home, find a different tribe, but stay within disability because there is much need, but there is so many rewarding moments and life-changing moments and impactful moments that we make along the way as clinicians. And so that's my heart, to really think how we can do things differently. And I mean, one of our OTs, she had, by July, 12 of her classmates had left their first jobs, and that's a really short turnover. And I think, I've had 20 years working as a speechie and I've never seen such high turnover as what I have here. And that was one thing when I started was, well, what's not working? What's not working? How can we do things differently? There are complexities in caseloads. There is travel involved. But how can we create a culture that embeds what clinicians need to feel that they're growing with them themselves, create a culture of support, have a place where they can be themselves. And I think that's part of it as well. Sometimes you study to become a clinician and you feel that you have to be a certain mold. And it was the thing that drew me to the recruitment ad for Ignite, was just that freedom to be yourself. And when you're yourself, you're your best self. You are your authentic self, and that shines through. And that's when you can build rapport with people and get to know them, because you're not operating in this fear of who I should be or who I need to be. You are just being you. And through that brings freedom, and it brings, that allows the people you're working alongside to do the same and to be themselves. So I'm really excited about just the ideas, keep spouting of all the things that we can do just to really make sure that people feel that they are, in a space where they are growing and where we're delivering what we say we do. I'm very big on, not gaslighting. I think there's a lot of shininess. I often say to new grads when I meet them, you guys are the chips on the beach, and there are seagulls circling, and there is a lot of squawking, and there's a lot of shiny packages that are put together about what can be on offer. And the hard thing is that that's not followed through with necessarily, or that they are told one thing. There might be a great new grad program, but they've failed to get that information. That's only 6 weeks. And so then actually you will be stepping up to quite a higher, more complex caseload. And that's where we're seeing this burnout and this cycle of clinicians leaving. And, when I came into Ignite and just learnt about this turnover, I just remember thinking I would love to create a place and a space where a support coordinator can ring 9 months later and say, hey, I really need an FCA done. Julie did a great job last time. Is she still there? And we us be able to say, yeah, she is. She is. And just have that stable workforce, because the participants are the ones that benefit out of this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're having to learn new names, new people, how to relate to this person. How the family has to learn about this new clinician as well. And it's, I met somebody the other day, we did the Disability Expo recently, and they had 7 OTs. They've had 7 OTs so far this year.
That's
and
crazy.
I just thought, how can you, all that funding that is being utilised by initial session after initial session, and nothing is then actually happening, and there's no continuation of therapy, and nobody's getting the best out of things. So that's my biggest heart for that side of it. And then stakeholders and people and those that we engage with for Ignite, they have answers. We just have to listen and be sensitive to that and be willing to take on feedback. We do not do things perfectly by all means. And I'm yet to meet anybody that does. But, I want feedback. I want to know what we could improve on. I want to know how we can improve processes. I want to know what's missing. I want to know where gaps in the market are. So, for example, last year, my kids go to a school in the Redlands, and I helped run a playgroup. And at the school, so many parents were saying to me, oh gosh, your allied health, we've been on wait lists for months and months. It's so hard to get anybody. And when we do, they leave really quickly. Or we have to take annual leave to take our kid out of school, go to the session, come back. It's an afternoon of annual leave, and it's an afternoon, my child's been out of the classroom. And so I went to the principal and said, would there be any way that we could maybe come and set up a collaboration where we come into the school and provide OT and speech? And that way, the children are not having to leave school. You're not having to take any leave. You know that they're in a safe environment, in a safe place. And for those children that have additional needs, we can help you as a family look at early childhood funding, what's available there. We can help you look at whether the NDIS might be warranted and assist with that, because a lot of the time it's just too overwhelming, so we just don't even try. And we can actually have a collaboration where therapy is not just for half an hour, but the teachers can then be debriefed about what things they could implement in the classroom. And that's not going to benefit just one child in the class, it's going to benefit all of them, because the whole class is now learning about interoception and how to read my body cues. And the whole class is learning about brain breaks and how to get the best out of learning and the way that my body needs to be able to be in a state of regulated emotions, to be able to take information on. And it's worked brilliantly. And it's things like that I love innovation and just seeing where the gaps are and what we can do.
So how long has that program been running for now?
So all year this
year,
year,
wow, awesome.
And we'll continue next year.
That's great news. So is that sort of, how did you get established that program?
So I initially thought, the therapist might go in once a month for a day. And then once we sort of put the word out to parents, we started getting more and more referrals. And so now our OTs are there twice a week, and so are the speechies.
Oh, wow.
And then what was brilliant, and I love this, and I think we're seeing an increase in need across all classrooms with children, and they realised as a school that the needs are classroom wide, as with all schools. And so they've actually got our paediatric OT to go in on a Monday. So for 2 terms, she's been going in and spending a day with the classroom and talking through the needs of that classroom and how they're modelling to the teachers how they can balance the needs of the class.
Quite an interesting resource for the teacher and such a benefit for the kids. That's awesome.
Yes. So it's been wonderful. I've loved seeing that work.
Have there been any real corresponding outcomes from the whole class as a whole in terms of participation, engagement?
Yes. Yep. So so many parents, when I go into the school grounds, I just get parents stop me and just say, "Oh my goodness, this has worked so well."
Favorite person in the school PNC.
Yeah.
Nomination for president next year.
Yes, please. No, but I think parents would come to me and say, "Oh, this seems like a lot of money that you're charging," because we keep our rates the same across this. The spectrum, because why should it be that somebody on the NDIS is penalised because they're on the NDIS compared to other people? So, and I said, yes, it is. And I have, do not feel like you need to use Ignite just because we're on the school grounds, but we are here. And the idea is that we're going to have a true collaboration happening. And it's been lovely hearing those parents come back and say it has been worth every cent we've invested in this. And I think just, one of my son's class has 18 boys in it. So there's a lot of testosterone. There's a lot of energy going on in that class. But the school have made adaptations for that. And so maths is now whole body movement and learning. And we're finding that kids are in the classroom for longer without needing to be outside and being taken out to be regulated. They can be regulated within the classroom environment, or need short periods outside before they can then integrate back in. So that's a huge win for those teachers that, do have children. And, it is a balancing act, because it's not only this, we've got one end of the bell curve where there are additional needs, but there's always another end of the bell curve where there are those extension needs. And so, they're managing this whole remit of children and need to be able to do that well. And so I always love hearing when our clinicians can get into schools. And it's hard. It's hard to get into schools. There's so many that the barriers go up for allied health, and I'm saying no,
seems really
we can come
weird
and help
with the clear outcomes that are for both the students receiving the education, the educators providing that education,
yes.
the school community as a whole, parents.
Yes.
In a couple of episodes back, we were talking about the NDIS review and the Disability Royal Commission, and some of the commissioners' push around going or removing special needs schools.
Yes.
And we sort of have we don't know where we sit on. I think is the end point is where we're coming from. But the more that we could see of this starts to then push a pathway. To that, because I think also by educating the whole student base or the class base also gets them to understand the people that might need those more supports a lot better as well, and how to engage, and that sort of breaks down the stigma and negative sort of vibrations that kind of have been institutionalized or embedded in institutions, this is fantastic. I'm loving it.
Yes. And that's the thing. It's not just one kid has to go and do some weird exercises that the rest of the class watches. The whole class is doing them. So it's just normal. It's just normal. And then, you think about the stigmas, like you say, that kids have when there's a diagnosis attached. We see that frequently as parents are really reluctant to get a diagnosis made on their child because they don't want them labelled and they don't want them to be different. And it's about saying, no, that this is, it's not for those purposes, but it's so we can identify those needs and provide those supports because they're out there. And, like you think about the early childhood approach, so many people don't know it exists. And, they think, oh, well, we need this diagnosis. We're on a wait list for a pediatrician for 2 years. No. Just from what you can say as a parent will be enough to be able to access that funding. And there's a real lack of information out there for people to be able to understand how they can engage. And, that it's certainly not about shaming and diagnoses and labels, but it is about being able to reduce stigma and peer. You think about peer support and the power of peers, and within that school setting, they just become part of the class. Then they're not a child with additional needs. And one of my daughter's teacher the other day said it's been one of the things that they have loved, and she's in prep, so littlies, these brains are not developed yet. But when someone has big feelings, the rest of the class just get on with it. And it's not, nobody sits and stares at someone having big feelings and these big moments, because it's just part of what you have in the class. And I love hearing things like that, because the people that we're supporting have big feelings. They have big moments. They have all behaviour is a way of communicating. When your locus of control becomes very small, then you will try and control what you can in the way that you can control it. And often that is the way that you use your body, or you use your voice and you use your actions, because that is all you've got to control in that moment. And for these little people, that's what they can do. And so if we can come in from this beautiful holistic approach and collaborate and work together, and that's always my word, is collaboration and working together alongside these participants. How can we make this easier for them? How can we make it easier for these parents? So many parents, it's not just one child. They might have 2 or 3 that are needing to access clinicians and therapy. And how do you make that work? And how do you make it work when you need to work and get a job and you've got a rent to pay and there's after school care? There's all of these things that are going on constantly for them. And this is not just one day of it. This is day in, day out. And so how can we support those parents? Like, what supports do they need? What help do they need? And I have to say, that's one of my stories of this year from our clinician. We had a new grade OT start, and in the session, they got spat on. It was one of the first sessions they got spat on. And I was over on Russell Island at an event and got a phone call. And, in those situations, you generally expect them to say, oh, I'm not seeing that person again, or, this is really frightening, and, that's what you sort of go into that phone call thinking. And the first thing they said to me was, this family needs help, Sarah. What else can we do for them? It's not just the child. The parents need help. What can we do? And I loved that. I'm just like, this is the way we need to be seeing that, because, again, all behaviour is communication. And, that's another thing that I'm really passionate about in the sector, is new graduates often get such a bad rep and such a bad rap because, they are new, they're fresh. However, I say to people, they come with much more energy than I have. My goodness, much more energy and knowledge. They've just learned all the latest and greatest stuff. They know it. And they're not marred by fatigue or, compassion fatigue and burnout. And, if we have people, and look, there are absolutely, complex cases where there needs to be clinicians of a certain level and caliber and experience and trauma-informed care and all of these sorts of things. Absolutely, there's a place for it. But if we can develop new graduates to be providing great care, because we have an ecosystem of support around them, they're going to flourish. And so, we have a 20-plus year experienced OT in the paediatric space who's worked in, countries all around the world and done incredible things. And she supervises our new grade OTs. And I'll often walk into the office and they're all lying on the floor in the peds room with resources out, talking about what they've done, great wins for the week, how they can think about using these things differently within the space, tips and tricks for the trade and those sorts of things. And I love seeing that, because sometimes think I've got some wisdom to pass down. But, I've had 20 years in the sector in providing therapy to people with neurological injuries. So, I'm really confident in that space. Do not give me a child, because I do not know what to do with a child. Please do not make me see a child. But, it's that experience and that sharing and that, empowering them that leads them to feel comfortable and confident to take that next step, and to not then react when a child spits in your face, but to say, hang on, I recognize there are needs, and this is why I've done my training, and this is why I am this person. And what an honor it is to be able to help these people out in their time of need.
Yeah, I love to hear that someone coming into the sector has already sort of got that mentality, because it's very quick that you sort of hear, you see on the Facebook groups, I had a participant do this, I can't deal with it, or just sort of bailing at that first trouble.
Yes.
I had we interviewed someone for our organisation recently, and the first thing it was ask a question: how do you perceive failure, or what is failure to you? And his response was, failure to me was giving up at the first failure point. And I really loved that in its whole, which is that same mentality of, well, something didn't work or there was a barrier. How do we work forward through it, rather than giving up or finding something else entirely?
Yes.
Before you even try again.
Yes. And I think that's the thing. If you don't have the right supports, well, then you feel like the only option is to give up, because how do I get through this? Or, I don't know. I don't know the way. That would have been a really easy scenario for that clinician to say, well, I haven't come to work to be spat on. I don't know what to do. You're not going to let me not see people like this, so this is not for me.
Yeah.
And
sounds like they're
serving
definitely
coffee.
taking the training and going, applying it to themselves, going, well, this is what's the next step?
Yes. And, like working in brain injury for years. So in Glasgow, I worked in a challenging behaviour unit. So that they were all the people that could not be placed anywhere in Scotland because they were so challenging. And when we started the unit, because I was sort of part of that induction of it, and so many of the staff would say, oh, I didn't come to work to be spoken to like that. And it was just the constant mantra. I would say part of their brain is missing and it's not coming back. They've not chosen this journey for them. And that's actually why we are here. We are here to be that part of their brain for them. And, I recognise that they've said something to you, but, again, this is why we're here. These are our jobs. We've chosen to be in this place.
Yeah, especially in that space.
Yes.
You're going to be confronted with this day in, day out.
Oh, that unit was brilliant. But again, I have to say it all came down to communication. Behaviours were communication. But yes, it was, I had real mace in my pocket. And at that unit, not in it, not at the workplace, but to get to it, it was the roughest of the rough area in Glasgow. And so when I took that job, that was my husband's request that I carry mace with me. So I did.
I'm just thinking back to what you said about being able to get into that school, because so many of the schools that I've spoken to, either for my participants, for my own children, refuse to have allied health come in, and they're like, oh, it's a privacy issue. And I'm like, but the teachers can learn so much from the allied health professionals.
Yes.
And I don't understand why you won't do this.
Well, I would definitely challenge it's a privacy issue. There's paperwork can be established to deal with these legalities.
Oh, there's a lot of, when we go on site, you should see the paperwork. I think one of the speeches the other day, she said it was 37 pages she had to read through to agree to enter the school for a 45-minute session. So they certainly don't make it easy. But you're right. Like, teachers struggle, and they have 24, 28 children to manage in that space. And it's the ones that we work, it's our participants that need to have their needs highlighted and focused on and resourced. It's really easy things that, we see, that's how we see things. We see things from a therapeutic disability lens. And so a child might need a sensory bucket full of fidget toys, or, these things, or a bodysuit, and they might need gentle calming activities, and this other child in the class needs active calming strategies. And so how do you amalgamate all of these things unless you're on site? And I think this is, when you're decontextualizing therapy, which when we work in the community, you think, oh, this is great because we're going to get to see them in their environment and we get to learn about them. But if we're going into a scenario, if we're not allowed into a school, we don't see them in their environment. We don't see them, how they're interacting with the classroom. How are they learning? How are they engaging in that learning space? And it makes it really tricky to be able to put things in place, because whenever you transport a child out of that environment into a false environment, and then you're just not seeing the same things. I love telehealth for that reason, that you can just, when we're engaging with families in telehealth, you can flick that iPad on and turn it around at dinner time and watch the chaos that unfolds in the house and see where those behaviours come. Because, what locus of control is that child trying to control in this environment, and what antecedents and happen before the behaviours. You can watch the whole picture. And so then it's easy to look at, okay, well, these are the things that we need to address because it's leading to this, and these are then the consequences. And so it's really nice and clear cut. But again, that telehealth it's that transporting into that home in an instant and getting to see that whole picture, which I love. And I think there's so much benefit to that.
It's quite a benefit that I hadn't thought of in terms of like the use and practicality of telehealth.
Yes.
Because it's not like you're going to go to someone, a client's home at 6 p.m. at night and watch it for dinner.
No, but you can do that. And I mean, that was one thing when I started Ignite, talking to David and him just saying there's so much need in rural communities. And then just seeing it. I mean, I know for us, even for me with Queensland Health, when some of our patients would be discharged out to places like Roma, I knew they weren't going to get assistance because there's no one there. I mean, Raffell Island is a great example. I had people that came that have months of therapy in this inpatient unit and then be discharged there and not have any speech because nobody would go there. So one of my first things when I started Ignite and met some of the people in the sector that said, the Moreton Bay Islands, no one goes to them. And I was like, well, we shall go. Like, why should someone be penalised because they choose to live on Raffell Island? Why should someone not get help because they're living on Macleay? Like, it's not okay. It's so close, and yet, it's viewed as this different world. And, the reason I got told, it's a business loss. It's a profit loss.
Because it costs so much money to get on the ferries to get out there. And then how do you recoup that cost for getting out there? Yeah. I mean, it is a genuine issue.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And so I guess, I was like, okay, BD brain on. Well, we just need to let people know. We need to meet the people that are out there, meet support coordinators that are servicing these islands, and then see if they've got more than one participant out there. Or can we go out and do an initial face-to-face and then do telehealth as follow-up? There are ways and means around it. Can they come, we used to be in Greenslopes for our office, and we moved to Capalaba because I thought, well, we're seeing, this great need on the islands, and Capalaba, Victoria Point, Redlands, that's where they're coming to if they're coming to the mainland, so then they could come to the clinic. So how can we try and make things as accessible as they can? And, choice and control needs to be what we are delivering in our service delivery models as well. So, people can have that choice of tele or face-to-face or a hybrid, or how can we make that work? But yeah, you're right. Like it's got to be bigger than the revenue loss that you might make for a couple of people, and look at the impact we're making in lives, because that's why we're here. This is our business. Yeah. This is our business of enriching lives, empowering abilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get so frustrated when some providers talk more about revenue and how to see a profit. And I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
No.
Because that feels gross to me.
Yes.
I mean, I have to make a living and I understand that. But there's a point at which you're going too far to see a profit.
Yes.
And that this isn't the sector to make a profit out of.
No.
You're not Coles.
No.
Stop it.
No.
So do you want to tell us a few stories of being a speech pathologist?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, the unit I worked in Glasgow, so it being a challenging behaviour unit, we had 25 beds, so 5 beds were for extreme behaviours. So we wore alarms that had sensors on them at all times, so people knew we were in the units. And then the other 20 beds was for just challenging behaviour. So we had 3 locked doors to get through to enter the unit.
It almost sounds like a prison.
Well, yeah, it was. There was a lot of restricted practice paperwork that needed to be done constantly.
Wow.
We had one gentleman who there used to be a courtyard between these 2 units, so the 20-bed unit and the 5-bed unit. And he was out having a cigarette one day and decided that he thought he was being held hostage. So to his credit, he had mobility issues, he had major speech issues, but he went and found a pen and paper, wrote a note and passed it through the window to somebody in the 5-bedded unit to say, "Call the police, I'm being held hostage." We didn't know any of this was happening. The guy in the 5-bedded unit had a few life skills, he'd acquired along the way, so managed to pickpocket one of the workers' phones out of their pocket. And we were sitting in a team meeting on a Tuesday morning and look up to see SWAT team. Glasgow police SWAT team outside with guns pointed at the windows and the sound of a helicopter above us. And he had managed to make the phone call, and I was like, full credit to these guys. This is fantastic problem solving. They have thought this through. They have made a plan. This is great initiation. And his speech was clear enough that he got to make a phone call to the police to ask them to come. This is great. So we used to have things like that happen. We had in front of the unit, there was a KFC, which was a KFC. Then there was a laundromat, which was used as a trafficking front. And then there was a garage, and the guys in the garage used to sell our participants drugs. And so they would go and get their newspaper, then morning newspaper, and buy drugs, and then bring them back to the unit. Then they'd plant them somewhere in the unit, but they had major memory issues. So then the dealers would turn up through the 3 doors, and the participants would not remember where they had stashed the drugs. And so then we'd have to call the police to bring the dogs in to find the drugs before we had the dealers pull out a knife. And there was it used to be called the Glasgow smile, where they'd slash your cheeks. And so, that was quite a normal thing to have. So yeah, it was certainly an eye-opener.
That explains the pepper spray.
Yes, yeah. One of the guys that came to us we had big tenement houses across the road from us. It was all sort of tenement, really, really low socioeconomic houses, overcrowding, just sort of all of that sort of stuff. And Ross Kemp is a guy who does documentaries around the world. He's a British guy, and I love his introduction one day was, I've been to the heart of the Amazon and I've dealt with tribes in this place, but Glasgow was the most frightening of them all. And he interviewed one of our guys that actually ended up in the unit because a lot of them were drug-related assaults. So 77% of the people that we saw had addiction issues and complex mental health as well. So they just sort of all went hand in hand. And this one guy, when they'd gone in to meet him in his house, hoarding, it was a really sad situation that he was living in. And Ross went to meet him and he said, "Oh, do you want to?" He said, "Yeah, I've been having a bit of trouble with my diabetes," which is actually how he ended up with his brain injury. And he said, "Yeah, my toes just keep turning black, so I just pop them off and put them on a jar on the TV. Do you want to see?" And the camera pans to this jar on the TV with some blackened gangrenous toes on them. So yeah, that's what that's what I'd come from when I moved to Australia. So my first day in the unit here, I mean, we're used to full on control. I mean, I had my jaw broken by somebody who had a psychotic break and thought I was his daughter. And it was the one day my emergency alarm didn't go off, so I couldn't get anyone to help me.
Oh no!
I had fire hydrants thrown at our heads. We had everything used to be bolted down and anti-ligature. And we had one guy who pulled up a park bench that was bolted into the concrete and throw it through the office window. So that just par for the course.
Yeah.
Normal day.
Just normal day in Glasgow. So when I moved here, my first day at work, they said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. We've got someone who's really challenging." And so I'm like, okay, I'm good. I've had a few years of this now. I'm good to go.
Sleeves up.
Yeah, ready to roll, guys, ready to roll. And I was like, "Oh, what happens?" And they're like, "Well, the other day he peed into a teapot." And I was like, "Okay, yep." And they're like, "No, that's it." I was like, but that was good forethought. Like, he problem solved and thought, this is a contained vessel. This was not into a rubbish bin where it, leaked everywhere with like, and they're like, no, but he's very, very challenging. And I was like, okay, we're taking it down a level. We're taking it down a level here.
I'm glad you took it down a level by coming to Brisbane. Like, Brisbane was down a level.
Well, it kind of just makes me think sometimes is like, how do we perceive very extreme situations versus what actually is an extreme situation?
For them, that was really challenging. That was a really challenging person that they were really struggling with. And yeah, it's made me think of that a lot. And when you hear, I hate hearing the term behavioural. That's a real trigger word for me, because I'm like, what do you mean behavioural? Like, no, what are they telling you? Their behaviours are telling you something. They're not just choosing to be behavioural. And, we work in a sector where there are complex people that have complex needs and complex things to communicate. And so I don't want to hear the term behavioural all the time, because that's not what it's about. And I love that PBS and positive behaviour support is becoming something that is a highlight now and is a need, because we have participants that need those additional supports, and psychology, coming alongside things. And I mean, the other day I met a behavioural optometrist, and I haven't even heard about behavioural optometry, but to the extent of what she was saying, she can help support people with ADHD and ASD in terms of what they can do alongside OTs. And this new job is going to be just so exciting for these reasons, because how can we then develop, a great toolkit that we deliver to people we are seeing and working with, and then just making sure that people we see have had an eye test from a behavioural optometrist, not just at Specsavers, but actually somebody that understands it. Although nothing wrong with Specsavers.
Yeah, we still love Specsavers.
I still do use Specsavers. Just a little adjunct in there. But, how can we look at that broader picture? Next door to where the office is, we have play therapists, and I met with them the other day, and they're coming to speak to our team next Tuesday, and the toolkits that they use and the lens that they see things through is such a beautiful adjunct to OT and speech. And so how, it's collaboration. How can we work together in this space? And when I started with Ignite and in this sector, I think that was one of the things that struck me. The high turnover of clinicians, but also support coordinators, which says a lot about caseloads complexity.
More KPIs in
billables,
my
yes.
humble opinion, because the KPIs at some companies can be just beyond what can physically actually be done in a day.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that turns a lot of people away from the sector. Even I had a conversation once with a physio who was talking about how they worked for one of the big companies.
Yep.
And they had to bill, even for the time if they had to stop on the way to someone's house to go to the toilet or something, all of that time was still billable. And he just was like, I hated it, because to me that was not ethical.
Yes.
And so what happens is you either get people like me and like that person who go, stuff y'all, I'm going out on my own, or you get people who go, oh, clearly this is what it is, and I don't like it, so I'm leaving the sector altogether.
And I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I think there's that oh gosh, everyone else seems to be coping. Why am I not coping?
Yes.
It's obviously a me problem, so I'm going somewhere else. But you're right. And billables are huge. They're huge for us and, allied health. It's one thing, and that's one thing I've loved with Ignite. We offer the lowest billables for new graduates that I've heard of in the sector, and for a year. You come in and you've got a year at that level. We are not going to expect you to jump up after 6 weeks, because there is that recognition that this is your year of growth, and not just as a clinician, but a lot of them are in their first jobs. This is the first time you're having to turn up at a certain time every day. Like, this is a big thing. I have to make a lunch every day. This is this is all new. But how can we create these sustainable environments where people can grow and develop? And I think it goes at loggerheads when you come in with we're empathetic people and we have stories and we have these big hearts, but then you have a business to run. And so, that's what I've loved doing, I guess, as a clinician. How do we merge the two together, and how do we make it work and not feel that we're dumping thing after thing on these clinicians that have complex caseloads? How can we, we cover all of Brisbane. That's a big area, and we take it on the head for unbillable travel. There's a lot of unbillable travel that happens, but there's need. And I got an old school map the other day. Didn't even know you could still buy them, but I found one and I've put it up on the wall at the office. And I was saying to the team the other day, this is where the greatest needs are on the far north, south, east, west, because that's where people can afford to live. People cannot afford to live in the CBD and in the areas that are 20 minutes billable travel from an office, because rent is what it is. The cost of living is what it is. And so that is why it's the outskirts of Brisbane that have the greatest need, and so has the greatest travel. And so then it's about equipping clinicians to understand that, there might be a bit more travel involved, but man, you get to listen to a podcast like this one while you're traveling and you're being paid for it. And, as a company, we absorb those other costs. Like, that's part of what we do because we see the need is there. And rather than, this whole, or, clinicians that are expected to drive for 2 hours or, sit in traffic for 2 hours. And so just, really looking at how we're doing runs of things. And then I guess, the BD side of me and looking at meeting those people and support coordinators or organisations that might be based in, say Ipswich. And so then if we have an OT that has a gap in their day, and when they're out west, being able to say, hey, do you have anybody that's got immediate need? Because we've got a space. And again, that comes down to that collaboration. So working together, and, so then that clinician is meeting their billables easily in a day and are not feeling like they're having to, you should never see 2 IKEAs in a day, is my firm belief as a mobile clinician. That is wrong if you are seeing 2 IKEAs in a day. But just being able to, know that this is where I'm going this day, that brings a certain sense of relief. This company's got me, and they're not expecting me to do all of this travel that becomes unreasonable and tiring. And so, balancing big clinical days with days where you might be catching up on that paperwork and that admin, and communicating with support coordinators. I think, I didn't understand this kind of, why did Allied Health not talk to support coordinators, and why? And I think, there's been this feeling that you're at the mercy of a support coordinator because they're the ones that send the referrals. And, it was a big journey for me learning, actually, no, support coordinators are incredible people who, to do over and above so often of what they do need to do because they want to make a difference in that life. And they are there as a source of truth. They're also there as a source of being able to get the information when we can't. It's a big machine. The NDIS is a very big machine. We don't have the names of planners. We might get a first name, but we don't have a contact number. We can't just email to say, hey, just to clarify this. And, support coordinators are stretched thin because they are being all things to a lot of people. But, using them, working together. And again, saying, hey, I've sent this report off. Is there anything that I can do to change it? This is not me being offended. This is me humbly saying, I don't get it right all the time. And you see a lot more reports than I do because you've got a lot more review meetings. So what's that feedback you've got for us? And how can we do things differently? And again, that just working together and listening to each other.
Collaborating.
It's my favourite thing, Sam.
We know lots of people that like collaboration.
Yeah. But it really is. And, and getting rid of that competition. So, I remember I met John Kairos from Amend Rehab, and I met him at one of Karen's events and just thought, this is a really good guy, and he sounds like he's got a very similar ethos to me about a lot of things, and got talking to him, and I said to him, I would love to work with you because I have OTs that can't do certain things or don't have skill sets, and you have OTs that fill the gaps that we don't have. And you have physios and we don't, and we have speeches and you don't. And that's, we've been pretty strategic here in Queensland. We've stuck with OT and speech and allied health assistants because I am a big believer that you can't be all things and do all things well. And I want to stay in a lane, and I want to create that ecosystem of support for OTs, and the same thing for speech, so that we're well resourced. We have the best PD opportunities for these guys, so that we have great OTs and great speechies. And then we can use great physios from elsewhere, or, great psychologists from elsewhere. Hively Health, like I love them for their PBS and their psychologists. And I can say assuredly when people come to me and say, oh, do you do PBS? No, I don't. But here are some names of other providers who think like we do and have the same values we do. And I can say that with confidence. And so, when I met John, it was just so lovely to just find that person that, instead of this being this competition and, these referrals are mine, just getting consent, obviously, but just, being able to say to people when they come to us, for a complex home mods assessment and we don't have a clinician that can do that, instead of saying, yeah, we'll take them, and then forcing that on a clinician who doesn't feel comfortable and confident, and then, they feel like they're a failure. And then, you're just never going to get anywhere good in that scenario, being able to pass that on to other providers. And
and not wasting participants' money.
Well, this is it. Because, like I said, I'm a speechy, but if you give me a pediatric case, I don't know what I'm doing. I can maybe look up something on the internet, like I would be doing what you were doing, probably. But, there has to be, I'm a very big believer in specialised caseloads within clinicians. Like, we need clinicians that this is my jam, I can do this well. This is not. And so this is where I can pass this over. And I think historically in this space, NDIS clinicians have needed to be seen as generalists, and you should be a generalist. And there are some people that are generalists and do it well, and there are some of us that don't, but we do what we do well. And so, finding those people, I want to have this database so that when someone calls me and says, I need a driving assessment, I can say, oh, I met this wonderful lady the other day called Jenny. She's here. She does this well, and I've got great feedback about her. Not, oh, yes, okay, yes, and put them on the wait list for us. It was one of the saddest things I have heard was when I met somebody and they own a speech practice and they had 200 on their wait list.
Good Lord.
And I was like, what are you doing with that wait list? And she said, oh, we'll get to them at some point. And I just thought, no, this is not what the sector needs. We need those to be, who has capacity, who in Brisbane has capacity to see some of these 200 children, because, the difference of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of them sitting on a wait list, and the difference that will make in the longevity of their literacy and developmental skills and ability to engage in school is phenomenal.
It's definitely doing an injustice there.
It really is, yes. So as you can hear, there's lots of things I am very passionate about, but that's what I've loved.
I'm really passionate about that idea of clinicians specialising myself, and I think support coordinators should do it as well.
Yes.
And that's why I've also picked a specialisation.
Yes, which
and
I love.
It is very annoying to me when people are just generalists, because you really can't be when there's so many components to, say, occupational therapy, or so many components to speech therapy. You can't do all of it.
No, you can't do it all well. And, that's when you see providers they're set up and, you'll meet somebody and you'll say, oh, what do you do? And they say, oh, we just ticked all the boxes. It's like, well, that's not necessarily going to work out for anybody well. And I think,
let alone marketing for that business.
Well, that's what I always think. How do you fit all of that onto a flyer?
Yeah,
just the logistics of all of those words.
Do you use DL or do you use an A4?
That's an A3, man.
Yeah.
That's like at least 2 A3s put together.
Let's just jump up and go an AO.
That's a banner. But it is true, and finding that groove, finding what I often, the whole what makes your soul sing as a clinician. When you walk away from a session that might have been hard, but you think, my goodness, I loved that. Stay in there, sit in that space, learn all you can, absorb all you can about that condition, that, whether it's neurological peds, whether it's articulation, whatever this is going to look like, find your place and own it and do it well, and then teach others. Like pass it on, pass that knowledge on. And that is my hope, that there will just be pockets of clinicians where we are working and we can say, no, that person with Parkinson's should go to this person because they do an exceptional job with those people with Parkinson's and they get the journey from diagnosis right through. Let's send them there rather than, let's just put them on a wait list and hopefully they can be seen at some point by somebody that might have read something about Parkinson's at some point. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So before we wrap up today, we have one question that we like to ask all our guests, which is, in your ideal world, what would the NDIS look like?
Collaboration. First of all, collaboration and equality would be my 2 words. That collaborative space, so the things we've talked about, working together. I just see people standing shoulder to shoulder looking out rather than just being a sort of, I don't know.
No closing walls.
Yes, yeah. Collaboration between providers, collaboration within businesses as well. That's, bringing in support coordinators when you're in allied health, listening to what the market needs and providing those innovative ideas that aren't being necessarily met. Collaboration between providers looking at the needs of the population and how we can address those needs with the resources that we have, I think. And then that equality, I think I would love to see some form of benchmarking for people that are making decisions around plans, so that there is some health literacy attached to knowledge of what you are saying yes or no to. When you write a report, and FCAs carry a lot of weight, they are the kingpin now going into reviews, and funding is becoming less for the amount of hours OTs have to write them, which makes it tricky. But the other side is, unless we're writing a good job and actually showing up the functional implications of not providing this therapy, then it's a missed opportunity, because that shows up the inequality often. And we'll have plans that come through and people might have 7 hours for an FCA and others, might have 49 hours for an FCA. And so I would love to see there being more understanding of needs at that planning level so that right decisions are made. And I think part of that as well, being mobile, and majority of what we do is travel being recognised, and that not being an area of inequality. Because if people want to have therapy in the home, there are businesses, and so it costs money to do that. There are also regulations in the NDIS, which is great in terms of what we can and can't charge for. But if somebody lives rurally and they're getting 14 hours across a plan, how do we make that work? Whereas travel should just be a given. And, even when you look at the MM1 to 5, I'm always astounded. I'm like, how is that MM1? That's really far out. Just whether we look at a different way of being able to see where the servicing needs are. And like I said,
and even when they are sort of in that higher MM sort of regional range, the funding doesn't necessarily change to reflect
No, it doesn't.
that.
It really doesn't.
I've seen some really weird points
doesn't.
that just don't make sense, especially with how far out the participants are.
Yes. And I'm, like I said before, just because you choose to live somewhere should not mean you are penalised in terms of the resources that you get and the therapy you get. So yeah, that'd be my 2 things: collaboration, equality.
With that travel time issue, a lot of clinicians will have a table of, we'll do this many hours of therapy, this many hours of assessment, and this many hours of travel.
Yes.
And very often I've had a planner say, oh, well, we're not going to fund the travel because it's choice and control to get them to come out to you. You could have gone to them. And I get so frustrated with that because it is choice and control. I can choose to have them come out to me.
Yes.
And also there's parts in the pricing limits and pricing arrangements and price limits document that says we can charge for travel. So why put that in and then a planner say, oh no, we're not funding for the travel part?
Yes. And the choice and control should be which organisation they want to come out to them, not just whether they want them to come. It should be, well, I've actually now got the choice of many providers coming to me. But, even within that, you've got the choice of whether you charge just the travel or the travel plus kilometres. And so, there's
it comes back to that original point where you're
between,
saying that you don't charge that the additional price just because it's an NDIS service.
Yes.
Which
It's
is
just
something
it's
that
just
I'm
one.
sure Bill Shorten is right on there with you.
But, I just think people you've got this pool of money and you've got to make it go so far. And so how can we do that? And that's what that's my brain is always just thinking, how can we do that? So we've got allied health assistants, because they are $82 an hour, not $193 an hour. And so our clinicians can go out, see somebody do an initial, set up a program and plan, and then they get double the amount of therapy through an allied health assistant as they will from a clinician.
Smart
Let's
use of funding.
Exactly. That's how I'm always like, right, what can we do? And I mean, I've always used AHAs in my jobs because they are phenomenal people that get to carry out what we sort of set up and get to do that implementation. And I've loved seeing our clinicians at Ignite really utilise AHAs and see the benefit of them, and the families see the benefit of it. And it's, it's wonderful to say to them, you guys will get twice as much therapeutic input from having an AHA. And I mean, the therapist is still overseeing it.
It maximizes the clinician times. It maximizes the value for money out of it. It has a massive impact overall.
Exactly. Yes. That's how I see, and gone are the days of, well, we can go for a review and we'll get more money. Like, there is no guarantee of that. So, I'll often say to people, I look at what you've got here, and let's make this work, because we've got to make this go as far as it can go with what you've told me you want to do in terms of building capacity and how we can utilize these funds. So things like AHAs, things like making sure runs are done in the same area, so there's minimal travel between people. Nathan Lack at Total Support Service has been amazing and given us an office to use in Logan. So we have an office there now that he doesn't charge us for, which I love. And again,
plus his cotton socks.
Collaboration, Nathan. Thank you. But it means that people down in that Logan area can access therapy without travel charges if they choose to go to the office there. Now in Capalaba, we have clinic rooms as well, so people can choose to save travel to come to us. I'm going to look at out west where we can put offices so that we can have the same thing. So again, choice and control. So it's not, well, I'm at the mercy of whether this LAC is going to approve funding for travel or not. Now I have some choice because I have an office space that's close by and I can choose to access that or have someone come to me. So, always just trying to see how we can maximise things and make the most of what people
collaboration.
do have. That's right. Maximise, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sarah.
Oh, thank
it's
you
been
for
a pleasure.
having me.
I reckon we could have kept on talking for several more hours.
The speechy and me, yes. Oh, thank you so much. It's just, so lovely to meet like-minded people in the sector who just resonate well with what you think and, what we want to achieve together.
Thank you so much.
Huzzah!
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.